Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to continue reading the first book of Protector of the Small series, First Test. This book is by Tamora Pierce and it is published by RandomHouse. We're going to pick up where we left off with Chapter 7, Kell Takes a Stand. For the next 3 days, Kell pursued her classwork and physical training doggedly. When Sunday came at last, she and the other pages attended dawn worship for Mithros, the god of warriors and the sun. After that, she gave her weapons and tack an extra cleaning for Lord Wilden's inspection just before lunch. When he finished going over every inch of a page's equipment, he gave punishment assignments for the penalties collected during the week. Kell had been late to one class, to one meal, and to the riding corral the day before, when Peach Blossom had been grumpier than usual. For each of those tardy arrivals, Lord Wilden issued her work in the page's armory for one bell of time, consuming her entire afternoon. All of the other pages had punishment duty too. Merrick and Olin fared worse than Kell. They had to work all afternoon and for a bell on Sunday night. I think I'd like to find whoever taught the stump that extra work builds character and push him down the stairs, Neil told Kell at lunch. She smiled and returned to solving a problem. How was she to do her classwork for Monday if she was cleaning armor? At last she'd hit on a plan and bore her work to the armory. First she rolled chainmail in barrels full of sand to scour away dirt till she wearied, and then she attacked her assignments. At her first yawn, Kell returned to cleaning. When the supper bell rang, she had scoured a large amount of mail and finished nearly all of her classwork. After an evening of staff practice with Neil, she knew that she had used the day well and went to bed content. Monday came soon enough. By nightfall, she was exhausted and wishing for another Sunday. Then Cleon, grinning hugely, caught her after supper and asked her to fetch some books from the Mithrin's library in a separate wing of the palace. She could see that he was waiting for her to refuse, so he could say that she thought of herself as better than the other first years. With a sigh, she trotted off to do as she was bid. Tuesday was more of the same. Only her sparrow's reaction to her arm strength exercises, they lined up on her windowsill like spectators at a tournament, made Kell smile that day. At tilting practice later that morning, she managed to hit Peach Blossom's head and the quintain dummy, but not the target shield. The laughter of the pages and onlookers rang in her ears, but she kept her feelings hidden. By the time she rode Peach Blossom back to the stable, in the wake of the other pages, she wanted to crawl in a dark corner and die. Kell was the last to finish grooming her mount and the last to finish looking after her tack. By the time that she had tended to her weapons, all the other pages had gone. She had to hurry if she was to bathe before lunch. Working in a haste, she dropped her lance. It clattered across the stable floor, collecting dirt along its freshly oiled length. As it rolled, a small button of wood fell away, revealing a dark hole. Kell stared at the spot, wanting to cry. Now she would have to polish the lance again and find some way to fill the gap. Bending down, she picked up the piece that had fallen out. It wasn't a splintered chunk, but a perfectly cut plug 2 inches wide. The sides were sawn clean, tapering inward. That's odd, she thought, picking up the lance. She looked for a hole left by the missing piece. It was stark against the light brown of the wood because there was something black in its bottom. Kell stuck her little finger inside and scraped at the dark substance. Inspecting the stuff under her nail, she realized it was lead. Now she went over the entire lance, not with her calloused fingertips, but with the more sensitive pads of her finger. There were 5 more plugs, spaced out along the length of the wood. She pried them out, each hid a hollow filled with lead. They were placed so that no part of the staff was out of balance with the rest. It had been cleverly done. The plugs were placed to match the grain of the lance, and the whole polished until the cuts were nearly invisible. Kell lifted the other page's lances. All weighed much less than her own. Fury pounded at her temples and behind her eyes. Was this what Cleon had meant when he said to run while she still stood a chance? She pictured the big red head and sighed. No, he was the kind who would shove someone into a puddle. This sort of trickery would be too much work for Cleon. Getting her lance, Kell stuck the first plug back into its socket. She began to oil and polish the wood anew, thinking. Had Neil known about this? She tried to remember if she'd ever seen him touch her lance. No, he hadn't, nor had Wilden, she remembered. Joran had been the only one to handle it before it got to Kell. Custom dictated that Kell alone would touch it once it was hers. Kell was sure that Joran would not be the only one who knew. The joke was too good to keep to himself. He would have needed a palace carpenter, too. None of the pages would be able to do the kind of fine work that the trick lance required. Enough warriors trained with weighted arms that a carpenter would think of nothing of putting lead into a practice lance. Kell thought about it through her bath and took her time scrubbing. Normally she rushed so that no one had to wait long to eat, but today she did not feel kindly towards her fellow pages. For once she would have a proper wash and they could listen to their growling bellies for a while. If extra work was the price she had to pay to remind them that she could disrupt their lives too, she would pay it gladly. When Kell reached the mess hall, the waiting pages and squires growled. She put on her most Yamani lump expression and got her food. She knew it infuriated those who disliked her when she appeared not to care that they even existed. On a day like today, when, fairly or unfairly, she disliked most of the pages, she positively enjoyed letting them think that she cared for their opinions not one whit. "A word after lunch, probationer," Walden called as she looked around for Neil. Kell bowed to him, found Neil, and took her seat. Walden's prayer to perform our duties quickly and promptly did not even make her twitch. Neither did his after-lunch order to report to the armory on Sunday for 2 bells' worth of labor. She bowed politely to the training master in reply and ran to catch up with her friends. "Are you all right?" Prince Roald wanted to know as they walked to their afternoon classes. "You're being quiet, even for you." Kell glanced up. Both Roald and Neil were looking at her. She was certain that Neil didn't know about the lance, but what about the prince? He was one of Joran's yearmates. Despite his joining her and Neil from time to time, she wasn't sure what he thought of her. Finally, she decided that Roald didn't know. Joran had begun in the same year as the prince, but Roald, who was careful to eat with all of the pages so that no one felt jealous, spent the least amount of time with Joran and his cronies. Should she tell them? She knew that Neil was her friend, and she thought the prince might be. No, Yamanis did not whine about what was fair or unfair, and she was too much a Yamani still. She would not let anyone think that she could not handle whatever got dished out to her. Kell shook her head in answer to the prince's query. "I haven't anything to say." "Dear girl, we noticed," drawled Neil in his most scholarly, elegant way. Kell ignored him and returned to her complicated thoughts. What if she kept the lance? If she mastered it, the bigger lances of the knights would be easy to handle. The afternoon passed. Kell reported to classes as usual. She also studied each of her fellow pages, trying to guess which of them had been in on Joran's trick. At supper, she ate lightly. Given her plans for the evening, a full stomach was a bad idea. Going straight to her room, she changed from her dress to practice clothes. It was time to stop playing the shy newcomer. She listened as the boys returned to their rooms to collect their study materials. When Neil rapped on her door, she pretended that she wasn't in until he went away. Finally, no more steps sounded in the pages wing. Kell left her room to walk the corridors. She made no sound in her soft leather slippers, ghosting along as she had been taught in the islands, listening hard. Passing the pages' main library, she heard the slam of a heavy book striking the floor. "Pick that up for me, will you, Merrick?" The voice was Joran's. Kell stopped outside the open door. Her heart drummed in her chest. "Yes, sir, Page Joran," she heard Merrick say dully. Peeking through the crack in the door, Kell saw Merrick place a fat volume on the table next to the blonde page. As he did, Zahir shoved another heavy book off the table. "Pick it up," said Vincent of Genlith, cackling with mirth. "Can't have books on the floor." Merrick stared at the older boy with resentment and then got the book. Joran immediately pushed his volume off the table. As Merrick stared at him, Joran lifted a stack of smaller books with a taunting smile. His eyes never left Merrick's as he let them drop one by one onto the floor. Kell's stomach tightened. She took a deep breath and walked into the library. "This is wrong," she said, halting in front of the blonde page. "Oh, look, it's the lump." On the other side of the table, Vincent got to his feet. "Do you want trouble, probationer?" he asked. "We just love to give it to you." "No, I don't want it," Kell replied. She kept her eyes on Joran. The leader of a gang was always the one to watch. The others would take their cues from him. What I want is for you to stop pushing the first years around. Joran stared at her, his blue eyes bright. I see, he said, in a thoughtful tone. We haven't got rid of you yet, so you think you're accepted. Merrick, pick up those books. Don't, Merrick, Kell said, still watching Joran. It's custom, the redhead boy muttered. Not like this, it's not, replied Kell. Us fetching and carrying gloves and armor polish, that's enough. Forcing people to mop up with their clothes and pick up things dropped on purpose has nothing to do with being a page. Joran laughed softly, shaking his head. Oh, this is too much, he said at last. The Yamani lump, our very own temporary annoyance, will school us in proper behavior. Shouldn't have to, Kell told him. You should know how a true knight behaves. A hand clamped around the back of her neck. Zahir's. She hadn't even heard him get out of his chair. Shall I take the lump away? The Bazir inquired of Jordan. Gripping Zahir's index finger, Kell jammed her thumb into the very base of Zahir's own nail. The experience, she knew very well, was a painful one. He yelped and let go. Joran lunged for her. She stepped back, ducking under Zahir's frantic punch. Instead, the Bazir hit Joran. Kell backed up to reach the open center of the library. Merrick, to her relief, had fled. She was glad to not have to worry about him. Zahir was cursing and coddling his fist. His punch had connected solidly with Joran's skull. Joran rubbed the spot where his friend had struck as he walked towards Kell. He was crimson with rage. Vincent was nowhere to be seen. Something clattered behind Kell. In spite of herself, she looked. Vincent had fallen over a footstool as he emerged from the shelves at her rear. She turned quickly. Joran was leaping straight at her. Kell's Yamani training took over. She grabbed Joran's tunic and turned, kneeling as she did. He went flying over her shoulder, just as the Yamani ladies had done during their practices together. The ladies, however, did not hit a long study table on their bellies, sliding along its polished length to crash headfirst into a bookshelf. A foot slammed into her back between her shoulder blades. Zahir had recovered. Kell rolled forward as she went down to fetch up against the legs of the table she just polished Joran with. Zahir moved in to kick her, and she seized his booted foot and twisted, growling with the effort. Off balance, he stumbled and fell. Kell hurled a nearby stool at him. He rolled, covering his head with his arms. Then Vincent grabbed her ankles, dragging her forward. Kell sat up and grabbed his hands. Someone grasped her hair from behind and yanked her to the floor again. Ignoring the pain as the hair puller kept his grip, Kell rolled away from a punch. She clung to his wrist to keep him from yanking out a chunk of her hair. The roll twisted her out of Vincent's hold on her legs. She kicked out, slamming her feet into Vincent's belly. That hand in her hair yanked, dragging her to the middle of the floor. Her grim-faced captor was Joran. Kell felt his wrist and dug her thumbnails into the soft flesh between the bones. He cursed and let go. Lunging to her feet, Kell ran into Zahir. Grinning, the Bazir punched her in the stomach. When her scant supper came up, she made sure that he got most of it. Another solid blow from Joran connected with her back, spinning her around. His second punch hit her face, just as Vincent grabbed her. Next time, she thought fiercely, hooking Joran's leg with her foot and yanking, I'll make sure that I've got my back to the wall. Vincent was the last of the older pages to walk out of Lord Wilden's study. Through the open door, Kell heard the training master call, "Send her in." "Here, my lord," announced the man who waited on Lord Wilden in the evenings. Holding the door as Kell passed, he winked at her in encouragement. Kell halted in front of Lord Wilden's desk as the door closed. The training master inspected her and shook his head. Kell knew that she looked dreadful. From her past experiences, she knew that she had a black eye and a puffy lip. Her nose was probably broken. A trickling on her cheeks told her that the slits in both her eyebrows were bleeding. "Blot that," Wilden ordered and thrust his handkerchief across the desk. Kell stared as if he had offered a foreign object and then reached for it stiffly. Her left arm hurt. The skin on her knuckles was torn and bleeding on both hands. "Would you care to explain?" Wilden picked up a large cup and sipped from it. "Sir?" she asked thickly. "How were you injured? As I recall, you were in one piece earlier tonight." She tried to breathe through her nose and winced. "I fell down, Lord Wilden," she said carefully, Lifting the handkerchief from her cut, she examined it with her good eye and pressed the clean linen to the split in the other brow. "What did you say, probationer?" His tone made her stiffen. She tried to stand tall and put her hands behind her back, as they were expected to in question. The left arm only went so far before the pain made her dizzy. Never mind that," Wilden snapped. "Answer me." "I fell," she replied evenly. At least she didn't have to worry about making up a lie when a time-honored custom already supplied her with one. Wilden fiddled with his tea mug. Come, girl, you were in a fight. Name those you fought with." "Begging your pardon, my lord, but there was no fight," she told him. "I fell down." "You fought with Jorn, Zahir, and Vincent," Wilden reminded her. "Did they say that?" asked Kell, her face as blank as any trueborn Yamani's. "How strange. I fell down." Wilden stared. "I imagine you have now come to your senses and wish to go home. At this time of year that will be difficult." Surprised enough to forget her manners, she interrupted him. "No, sir." "It will not be difficult? For your information, it has been snowing in the north over the past few weeks. It will snow here tonight." Wilden rubbed his healing arm. "No, sir," Kell repeated firmly. "I don't want to go home. Your lordship." "You don't want to go home?" If she hadn't believed that he could never be startled, she might have thought that he was now. He normally didn't repeat simple ideas. "I don't believe falling down is an offense for which I can be expelled," she said, trying to speak clearly. "I still have the rest of the year to prove myself." Wilden tapped his fingers on his desk. "You have the armory Sunday afternoons until April," he said at last, "and an essay each week on the improper uses of combat training. Now, you better see a palace healer. That nose looks broken. Dismissed." Kell bowed stiffly and then remembered something. She held out his handkerchief. "Have it washed and returned to me," Wilden ordered. "Very good, my lord," she replied, and left. Neil would tell her where the healer saw patients. Dukebaird of Queenscove, chief of the realm's healers, was a tall, weary-looking man. A dark gray overrobe protected the black velvet tunic and hose that he wore in mourning for the two sons that he had lost. His eyes were a darker green than Neil's, set under straight brows. There was a red tint to his brown hair that was absent in his son's, but they had the same nose and the same direct gaze. While Neil paced, Baird rested big hands on Kell's shoulders. She saw his magic as an emerald green-colored light around his hands, and she felt it as a cool tide through her body. Her stiffness eased, the edge came off her aches. Kell had been beaten up before, but never so thoroughly. It shamed her to feel so happy at the easing of pain. The warriors at the imperial court had always insisted that they did not even pay attention to pain when they had it. Baird let go of her and rubbed his hands. "I am impressed, young lady," he told her with a wry smile. "You have been royally pounded." Kell smiled. "You should see the other fellows." "There!" cried Neil, holding up his hands. "You see what I have to deal with?" "You may have noticed that my son has an endless capacity for drama," Baird told Kell. She couldn't help it. She grinned, and she winced as her split lip opened. "Ah," said the healer Duke, "we can't have that." He touched an icy finger to Kell's lip. The hurt vanished. Next, he touched the cuts in her eyebrows and on her hands. They went cold and then painless. The swelling on her knuckles shrank. Scraped places scabbed as if Dukebaird had put 3 days' worth of healing into her. "So much for chivalrous ideals, eh?" Neil demanded. 3 pages in their 3rd year of training. Jump a first season page. "I started it," Kell informed her friend. "Tell me another," he snapped. "I did, on my honor." Kell looked at Neil's father. "I think Lord Wilden just wanted my nose seen to, your grace, not the rest." "Since he sent you without written instructions, I may exercise my judgment," Baird told her. "I will indeed see to your nose. You have also pulled muscles in your left side. Can mend that and reduce the swelling around your eye. Will not do if you were to miss training because you could not see. Can also ease that headache." "What possessed you?" demanded Neil. He seemed as vexed by this matter-of-fact discussion as by Kell's story. "Why, in the name of all the gods in all the eastern and southern lands, would you start a fight with them?" Kell sighed. She wasn't about to tell how Merrick had been shamed. "I didn't like the shape of Jorn's nose." Neil stared at her, eyes bulging. Finally he said, "If you meant to impress the stump, you wasted your time. Don't you realize he'll never let you stay?" Kell looked down. He could change his mind, she insisted. You always think the worst of him. I what? Neil began to produce a series of outraged noises that included squawks and whistling and hailing breaths. He sounded like one of her young nephews having a tantrum, not like a 15-year-old who'd been raised at court and at the university. If you cannot be quiet while I work, his father told him patiently, go in the waiting room. Neil marched out. A moment later, they heard him arguing with himself. Dukebaird closed the examining room door and placed his hands on either side of Keldry's head. This may sting a bit, he warned. Sting was not the word Kell would have used to describe the healing of her broken nose. The flesh around it moved, cartilage grated, her sinuses and teeth ached sharply and then throbbed. Then the pain stopped abruptly, and she could breathe again. She could also see from both eyes. The ache in her left side was healing. A moment later, Dukebaird stepped away from her. Beautiful, he said with approval. You're quite strong, you know. Couldn't have done nearly so much if you weren't in the pink of health to begin with. You didn't fight me either. You made it easy. My mother cracked us on the head with her fan when we fought the healers, Kell admitted. We decided it was better to let them do their work. The Elaine of Seabeth and Sijan I used to dance with was a most forthright young lady, Baird admitted, smiling. I'm glad to see that she still is. Now it was Kell's turn to gape. Her mother used to dance with men who were not her father? I hope you will remember me to her when you next write. Baird helped her to slide off his examining table. Yes, sir. Yes, your grace, Kell said, fumbling around the proper words for a man of his rank. Baird opened the door to his waiting room. Neil stood in the middle of it, hands on his hips. I've decided, Neil announced. She's insane. This entire palace is insane. His father lifted reddish-brown eyebrows. Does this mean that you have come to your senses and will return to the university? He asked mildly. Neil choked, glared at his father, and stalked out of the room. I didn't think so, Baird remarked softly. Keldry, I would like to say I hope we only meet socially in the future. Somehow, I do not think that will be the case. Kell grinned at him. You're probably right, your grace. Don't mind my boy. He gets over-enthusiastic, but he has a good heart. I know that, Kell reassured the Duke, and yawned. To bed, the healer ordered. You need sleep. Kell bowed, covering another yawn, and trotted to catch up with Neil. That's where we're going to stop for today. Join us tomorrow for the beginning of Chapter 8, Winter. We've been reading Protector of the Small, The First Test by Tamora Pierce. This book is published by RandomHouse. Once again, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.